Wesch, lesson 6, video 6. We're talking about gender. He makes a comment in Northern Europe where gender equality is highest. Really? The country with the highest number of based on equality here, it looks like Saudi Arabia, where 54% of your, no, 56%, 58% of your college graduates are women, and it's closer to like 62% of those graduating with STEM degrees are women. Um, Seems to have a little more equality than Luxembourg and the Netherlands, where those numbers are so much lower. Uh, anyway, hey, a little bit of a quiz here. The highest number of self-made women millionaires. What country is it? More self-made, not inherited. It's not that you inherited $1 million from your parents. It's that you started out with nothing and you built a business and you are now a millionaire and you did it as a woman. What's the country? It's not America. It's not Germany. China. Okay, are gender stereotypes universal? Sex slash gender. Sex versus gender. Sex gender used to be split into sex, biological differences between male and female bodies, and gender, the roles played by men and women. This is the line Wesch is going with. He talks about sex being chromosomal differences that produce primary and secondary sex characteristics. And then gender as being social, cultural, and psychological constructions connected to those sexes in a given society. There was no essential connection between these two. Makeup could be worn by both men and women, men and not women, women and not men. Some societies did assign men to care for children and clean the house, and women to go out and earn a living, and other societies the opposite. So there's really no connection between what social, cultural, and psychological constructions are connected to which sex. But however, despite what Wesch is saying, I would like us to look a little more deeply into this. So I'm departing from the text here and talking about sex slash gender as a complex. Because separating in this way contributed to some people believing that sex is biological and scientific and thus not cultural at all. But sex, like race, is also culturally constructed. So physical features are there. I'm not disputing reality, but how those physical features are read by human culture to mean certain things vary tremendously. Actions and roles as well vary tremendously. Both sex and gender are mediated through cultural values and meanings, and we are departing from Wesch again. And I apologize, but that's just the nature of the beast. College, where the professor knows more than the textbook writer. Composite nature of sex slash gender. So there are chromosomal primary and secondary characteristics, and they can be connected, but that connection is not necessary. So chromosomes, where do the chromosomes come from? They come from the gonads usually. Testicles produce male hormones, and ovaries produce female hormones. But that's not necessary. It's not necessary for that to happen. People of any sex can take hormones. People with testicles can take female hormones, and people with ovaries can take male hormones, and those hormones will be in the body and they'll produce the same secondary characteristics of beards and breasts and all that. So it's not necessary to have the biology do it. The technology can do it as well. 6 components of sex and gender. We have 4 that are connected to gender. You can see roles, display, personality, and identity are all connected to gender. And then preference and body are more about sex. So when we're talking about gender roles, we're talking about stereotypical behaviors. What do you in your society, when you do that specific behavior, is that connected to masculinity or femininity? Gender displays. This is your presentation in terms of clothing, speech, and hairstyles. Are you displaying or presenting more a masculine or a feminine presentation? And then gender personality. This is not having to do with the clothing, speech, and hairstyles, but more about emotional, cognitive, and other traits like communication styles. How do you talk? Um, these are more subtle personality aspects that are connected to one gender or another. And then gender identity. When you're asked to identify with men or with women, or as a man or as a woman, which gender identity do you identify with on a personal level? So those four things, they can all vary independently. You can present as neutral, but identify as a woman, but have actually very masculine communication styles. They vary back and forth. So don't see that it's all on one side or the other. Sexual preference. This has to do with sexual intercourse. Do you prefer sex with men, with women, with both, with neither, etc.? And that's behaviors, and that's very limited and prescribed sexual intercourse behaviors. And then body, and this is the last one. This is the chromosomes, gonads, genitals, hormones, and those secondary characteristics. What kind of body is it that you have? Okay. Multiple genders. Many cultures have 5 genders: men, women, trans men, and then gender transcendent people who are neutral in the middle. So some cultures have more than 5 genders. That seems to be sort of a typical one for cultures that have multiple genders. There's 5 of them. Intersex, finally, there are around 70 million people worldwide who were born with ambiguous chromosomes, ambiguous reproductive organs, or ambiguous genitals. And so that's something, those are different as well. I mean, many times they will have different kinds of gender roles and displays and personalities and identities, and it's all stuff that's none of our business. Them and their doctor. Making gender. Beliefs, actions, and structures. Again, we're talking about beliefs, and then we're talking about behaviors, and then we're talking about institutions. So beliefs and expectations. These are ideas about how girls and women and boys and men should act. Behaviors and interactions. When people defy these expectations, what are the consequences? What do people say? What do people do to them? Parents and siblings and teachers and classmates and coworkers, etc. And then finally, there's structured institutions. So these expectations and consequences are reinforced by institutions in toy stores, hospitals, schools, prisons, the BMV, restrooms, nail salons, military academies, shooting ranges, sports teams, etc. All of these things are reinforced. Even here we go. The ID. Let me cover up my key information here. Let me see. There it is at the bottom. Sex M, right? But there's no race or religion. So we have categories that are presented here. 215. Yeah. I really weigh 215 pounds. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I have that M there. And when I was in North Carolina for a year, it actually had race there. And, you could put in black or white or, Asian, I guess, would be an option, or Hispanic. Those are probably the 4 ones. Probably no Native American for race because um, they're that bad. Uh, but it's bad enough to be putting race on there anyway. They left it blank for mine. I think most times in North Carolina they leave it blank, but the category is still there. And when I was in Egypt for 3 years, they were right when I got there. That was the end of a long, like decade long battle of Baha'is, which is a religion, and there's numerous ones in Egypt, and they are neither Christian nor Muslim nor Jewish. And in Egypt, those are your 3 options: either you're Christian, or you're Jewish, or you're Muslim. And anybody else who doesn't fit into that, boom, you don't exist. Um, and so they couldn't get ID cards because they had converted, their grandpa, great grandpa, whatever, had converted from Christianity or Judaism or Islam, had converted to become a Baha'i, and they had married other Baha'i people, and they had lived in Baha'i communities for generations, but they could never get an ID card, which means their kids could never go to school. They couldn't get married legally. They couldn't, get a passport and travel outside of the country. In some cases, they couldn't get certain kinds of jobs that required having a state ID. Definitely couldn't vote. All this stuff that you need because you can't get a national ID card because when they say religion, you say Baha'i. They're like, there's no option for that. Either you fill in information, and it's one of those three religions, or you get out of the office right now. And so finally, when we got there in 2009, they had just said, okay, we can leave that place blank on your ID card. And hopefully the gender one will go away in the next few years in the United States, and we'll be like that as well. It'll probably take a decade of lawsuits to do that, and eventually they'll start leaving it blank, and then maybe take off that entirely. In the future, we can join the ranks of the enlightened too.